Reporting. Let's get some more on all of this. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries is joining us. He's a Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Wolf.
So the New York Times is reporting that this past February, the FBI actually briefed Hope Hicks, who's now the president's communications director, about efforts by Russians to contact her during the presidential transition. What does that tell you?
Well, the entire sordid episode involving Russia and the Trump campaign seems to have bled into Russian involvement in some way, shape, or form during the transition, and perhaps even Russian attempts to continue to influence the administration once President Donald Trump was sworn in. I'm pleased, of course, that the FBI took steps to try to defensively prevent the level of infiltration that may have occurred during the Trump campaign. But it's all very troubling and needs to be unraveled, which I expect will be done by the special prosecutor, Bob Mueller.
The New York Times congressman is also reporting that Hope Hicks was interviewed by the special counsel's team this week, actually today and yesterday. What other insight do you believe she would be able to provide Mueller's team?
Well, she's a very close advisor to Donald Trump. That was the case during the campaign, through the transition, and now into the presidency. Particularly as it relates to perhaps the episode where she may have been involved in working with both President Trump and Donald Trump Jr. in crafting a statement about one of the meetings that took place between Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and some Russian folks at the behest, it appears, of Vladimir Putin in Trump Tower, that was initially spun as all about Russian adoption, and we subsequently found out it had nothing to do with Russian adoption and seemed to be part of the effort to work closely between the Trump campaign as well as Russia and influencing the election. So she can shed some light perhaps on that, which may be part of an eventual obstruction of justice case that could unfold.
When you hear about the documents, enormous amount of documents, the electronics gathered in the investigations into Paul Manafort, he was the campaign chairman, Rick Gates, his associate, what does it tell you about Robert Mueller's case right now?
Well, he's incredibly thorough. That would be the special prosecutor, Bob Mueller, in terms of his approach. He's one of the most talented law enforcement professionals that we've ever seen here in the country, well respected on both sides of the aisle by anyone who is independent-minded. And he is obviously building a systematic and comprehensive case for the American people to uncover what exactly happened between Russian spies and the Trump campaign as part of Russia's effort to interfere in our election. He's going to operate on his own timeline. He's going to make sure that the documents are thoroughly reviewed and eventually build whatever cases need to be built in terms of justice and accountability in the context of last year's presidential election.
The fiancée of George Papadopoulos, he was the Trump campaign foreign policy advisor who pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. She says he was very involved in the Trump campaign's foreign policy and that, quote, he didn't take any initiative on his own without campaign approval. Do you believe her?
I absolutely believe her, in part because all of the president's men at the top levels, whether that's Paul Manafort, who was the campaign chairman, and of course Michael Flynn, who turned out to be the first national security advisor, Jeff Sessions, who's the attorney general, Donald Trump Jr., the son-in-law, son, I should say, Jared Kushner, the son-in-law. They were all engaging in conversations with Russian operatives at the same moment that Russia was interfering in our election, and then, in many instances, either failed to disclose or lied about those contacts until they unfolded. And so why would anyone reasonably believe that George Papadopoulos was just an errand boy, which is what the Trump campaign and Trump administration now wants to project? I actually would believe Papadopoulos in the context, and we'll see what eventually unfolds in terms of his involvement.
President Trump, as you know, he's ramped up his attacks on the FBI. Were you satisfied with the FBI Director Christopher Wray's defense of the FBI yesterday?
I thought it was thorough. He came across as a straight shooter. He was obviously prepared to stand up for the FBI and the importance of that organization and the sacrifice that FBI agents make each and every day in order to combat crime and keep the people of this country safe. And I thought it was a full-throated defense. Nobody expected him to throw President Donald Trump under the bus by mentioning him by name, but it was very clear that the FBI director was responding to the criticism that Donald Trump leveled at the FBI, which was woefully inappropriate for someone who is the commander-in-chief.
Listen to how at least some on Fox News describe Robert Mueller's investigation right now. Listen to this.
Robert Mueller's partisan, extremely biased, hyper-partisan attack team.
And Mueller has been using the FBI as a political weapon.
This entire witch hunt needs to be shut down and shut down immediately.
It's like the old KGB that comes for you in the dark of the night.
I think there will be other revelations of bias and prejudice and improper conduct on behalf of the Department of Justice.
What Mueller did, he hired a pedigreed team of obvious partisans.
Mueller is corrupt. The senior FBI is corrupt. The system is corrupt.
They should all step aside. They should all go back to their old law firm, their old buddies there, including Bob Mueller.
The only logical way to get to the answers for the American people is to appoint a second special counsel.
So what's your reaction when you hear that?
Well, the White House and their allies on Fox News are clearly in full spin control. They want to discredit the investigation, which has already indicted the campaign chairman on charges which include conspiracy against the United States of America. The National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, has acknowledged and pled guilty that he broke the law and is now cooperating with the special prosecutor. One of the foreign policy advisors, George Papadopoulos, has pled guilty and is cooperating with the special prosecutor. And this is only the beginning. So what we're seeing, unfortunately, is an effort by Donald Trump's allies to undermine the ultimate results of the investigation by trying to shape it as if it's some sort of partisan witch hunt. That's obviously not the case. Bob Mueller is well respected in Washington, D.C. He's going to follow the facts and the law, and that will ultimately guide whatever conclusion he reaches.
But, Congressman, what would you do? What could you do if the president fired Mueller?
Well, there's bipartisan legislation that has been introduced in the Senate to try to prevent that from occurring. Hopefully, in the House of Representatives, we'll see that legislation also move forward. There's some Democratic colleagues of mine who are working on it. We do need to see, Wolf, my Republican colleagues in the House start to put their country ahead of their party. We are a separate and co-equal branch of government in the House of Representatives. We don't work for Donald Trump. We work for the people of the United States of America. Many of my colleagues in the House to date don't seem to have gotten that memo, even though it was written by James Madison and the Founding Fathers.
Congressman Jeffrey, stand by. There's more information we need to discuss, but I got to take a quick break. We'll resume our coverage right after this. Happening now, breaking news, interviews and evidence. New information tonight about the Russia investigation. The FBI reportedly issuing a warning to one of the president's closest advisors, Hope Hicks. This as the special counsel collects an avalanche of evidence in the case against Paul Manafort. Record fire danger. The wildfire disaster in Southern California now stretching farther north and south of Los Angeles as new blazes break out tonight. More flames and destruction are forecast. Vote Roy Moore. The president tweets about the Alabama Senate candidate before heading to an event aimed at rallying Moore supporters. How will a new admission by one of Moore's accusers affect the sexual abuse scandal hanging over the race? And Olympic fears. We're learning more about the potential danger at the Winter Games on the Korean Peninsula. Will Kim Jong-un use his powerful weapons to disrupt or attack? There's reason for Americans to be concerned tonight. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We're following breaking news on the Russia investigation. Tonight, the New York Times is reporting that one of President Trump's closest advisors, Hope Hicks, was warned by the FBI about emails sent to her by Russian operatives during the transition. The special counsel's team reportedly interviewing Hicks over the last 2 days. This as a new court filing reveals prosecutors have collected a huge amount of evidence in the case against former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, including, get this, 400,000 documents and 36 laptops and other electronic devices. Also breaking, red-hot flames are swallowing a rapidly expanding area of Southern California, with new fires erupting and new evacuations ordered. President Trump now declaring the region a federal disaster area as multiple blazes rage out of control for a fifth day. And this hour, the president's controversial support for Roy Moore in the spotlight as he prepares to hold a campaign rally near the Alabama border. Mr. Trump also tweeting his endorsement for the U.S. Senate candidate, ignoring multiple allegations of past sexual abuse and assault by Moore involving teenage girls. Tonight, a Moore accuser who says he assaulted her when she was 16 years old is standing by her account and her claim that he wrote in her yearbook. But Beverly Nelson now admits that she added some notes to that yearbook message that she says was written by Moore decades ago. We're covering all of that, much more this hour with our guests, including Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, a Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. And our correspondents and specialists are also standing by. First, let's get to the breaking news on the special counsel's Russia investigation. Our justice correspondent, Jessica Schneider, is joining us. Jessica, the special counsel's team now digging for information from one of the president's closest advisors, Hope Hicks.
That's right, Wolf. We're learning tonight that Hope Hicks, White House communications director, she was interviewed late this week by the special counsel's team over a course of 2 days. That's according to the New York Times. Now, Hicks is of prime importance because of her proximity to the president. She started with the Trump Organization in 2014. She was a key point person when Donald Trump launched his campaign in 2015. The special counsel wants details on the drafting of the initial statement that described Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with Russians at Trump Tower. Well, it turns out Hope Hicks was on board Air Force One when it was written. And secondly, tonight, we now know that Hope Hicks was warned about Russian operatives by FBI officials twice earlier this year. That's also according to the New York Times. Those FBI agents, they met with Hope Hicks inside the Situation Room at the White House for what's known as a, quote, defensive briefing. They knew that she had received introductory emails from Russian government email addresses in the weeks just after the election, and they wanted to warn Hope Hicks that those emails and those people sending those emails weren't who they said they were and may have actually been part of a Russian intelligence operation. So a lot of warnings from the FBI over the course of
Jessica,
2 days.
we're also getting an enormous glimpse into the scope of this case against Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, the information that's been collected.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of documents, Wolf. This was all released in the government's court filings today. All of the documents are being handed over to the defendants, and the breakdown by number really showcases the enormous scale of this investigation. Prosecutors so far have collected 400,000 documents, including financial and bank account records, corporate records, and emails. And of those documents, 2,000 of them are labeled by prosecutors as, quote, hot documents. That refers to materials that are particularly relevant or important. Also, 36 laptops, phones, thumb drives, electronics, those were obtained during the raid at Paul Manafort's home in July. Investigators have also secured 15 search warrants, but perhaps the most intriguing disclosure in the prosecutor's filing today is this. The government has deposition testimony given by the defendants in another matter. Now, prosecutors are not saying exactly what that means, but of course depositions are out-of-court sworn testimony that can be used for discovery purposes or potentially at a trial, maybe in another trial here. Well, the government has released all of this information and the documents to those defendants, and Manafort and Gates are preparing for a court appearance Monday morning. Of course, both men have pleaded not guilty to money laundering and foreign lobbying, among other federal criminal charges. And Wolf, we know that this case is moving forward here, and it could go to trial as soon as spring 2018.
That's not too far away. All right, thanks very much for that, Jessica Schneider. Reporting now to President Trump. He's heading to Florida to hold a rally on Roy Moore's doorstep. The president going to new lengths to endorse the Alabama Senate candidate despite a sexual abuse scandal. Let's go to our White House correspondent, Sarah Murray. Sarah, 4 days before the election? The election is next Tuesday. President Trump is all in right now for Roy Moore.
Absolutely right, Wolf. And if the president has any reservations about these allegations against Roy Moore, that certainly did not come across today as he took off for Florida, as you said, right across the border there from Alabama. And everyone waits to see what he will have to say when he is up at that podium at that rally about this Alabama Senate hopeful. President Trump putting politics first today, using the bully pulpit to back a GOP Senate candidate accused of molesting a teenage girl. Vote Roy Moore, Trump tweeted today, reiterating his support for the Alabama Senate hopeful just hours before taking off for a campaign-style rally in Pensacola, Florida, just across the border from Alabama. The White House still insists Trump is concerned about the allegations against Moore.
We think that the allegations are troubling.
But if Trump has any qualms, he isn't showing them. Moore has been accused of sexual abuse or assault by 4 women, while 4 other women allege they were pursued by him as teenagers. The candidate has denied doing anything inappropriate, a denial that appears to hold more weight with the president than the mounting evidence against Moore.
He totally denies it. He says it didn't happen. And, you know, you have to listen to him also. Well, I know a lot about guns.
While the Republican National Committee initially said it would stop pouring resources into Moore's campaign, it has since reversed course. As the president places Moore's political value ahead of any concerns about his morality.
We don't want to have a liberal Democrat in Alabama, believe me. We want strong borders. We want stopping crime. We want to have the things that we represent, and we certainly don't want to have a liberal Democrat that's controlled by Nancy Pelosi and controlled by Chuck Schumer. We don't want to have that for Alabama. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
The RNC is following Trump's lead.
It's up to the voters of Alabama right now. This is democracy. They're going to see this play out. They get to make that decision. It's not up to me. And the president has said we want to keep the seat Republican. The RNC is the political arm of the White House, and we want to support the president's agenda.
Yet another controversy awaits the president on his southern swing. After Trump scheduled a stop on Saturday to attend the opening of the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, 2 black congressmen now say they will not attend the event. Democratic Congressman John Lewis, a civil rights icon, and Benny Thompson say they're skipping the event because President Trump's attendance and his hurtful policies are an insult to the people portrayed in this civil rights museum. In a statement, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said the president hopes others will join him in recognizing that the movement was about removing barriers and unifying Americans of all backgrounds. Now, the president may have plenty of controversy following him down south, but he does have one big positive to tout at his rally this evening. That's the state of the U.S. economy. The economy added 228,000 jobs last month. The unemployment rate stayed unchanged at 4.1%, but it is the lowest unemployment rate, Wolf, since December of 2000.
Very impressive numbers released today. Thanks so much for that, Sarah Murray. The breaking news, the New York Times is reporting that soon after President Trump's inauguration, the FBI warned a top White House staffer about Russian efforts to contact her. Our political and legal experts are here to discuss. And Pamela, the New York Times saying that Hope Hicks, who's now the communications director at the White House, was warned by the FBI about these contacts with Russians. Hicks was also interviewed, as you know, today and yesterday by the Robert Mueller special counsel team. What kind of role does she play? How big of a role does she play? And potentially, what might she be able to reveal?
Well, look, she plays a critical role as a witness in this investigation because she has been by Donald Trump's side since the very beginning of the campaign up until now as head of communications for the White House. So she has been there and has been a witness to a lot of aspects of this investigation, including the crafting of the Don Jr. Trump Tower meeting statement aboard Air Force One, among other things. So we have been expecting this interview with Mueller's team was going to happen. The fact that it happened over the course of 2 days clearly shows there was a lot of ground to cover here. Now, in terms of what the New York Times is reporting regarding the FBI warning her about these Russian attempts to reach out to her, we do know that the FBI did meet with White House officials earlier in the year to warn them about the possibility of this happening. But the Times is reporting that, in fact, it did happen, which is certainly very interesting, that even after all this news about the Russia probe has been out there, they're still making attempts to make inroads with Trump associates.
Very important indeed. Very interesting. Susan, we're also learning about the massive amount of information, documents that Mueller's team has already collected from Paul Manafort and his associate Rick Gates 400,000 documents, 36 laptops and other electronic devices, all collected through 15 search warrants. What does that tell you?
Right, so it seems like sort of a surprising amount, but it's actually not all that unusual for a really complex white-collar investigation to have sort of this amount of evidence being seized. The particular focus sort of on financial information, I think, has caused some people to say, hey, is Mueller now getting into that red line territory, that Trump had said, you're allowed to look at the collusion issue, but not anything else. I think the thing that's important to keep in mind here is that the people who determine the appropriate jurisdiction is going to be Mueller and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. There's a process at DOJ for requesting additional jurisdiction when needed. There's even a process for whenever Rosenstein disagrees with Mueller, notifying Congress about any kind of disagreement. So whatever the president says here about whether or not Mueller has gotten sort of beyond his own jurisdiction, that really is just talk, and there's no evidence that there's any kind of conflict at the DOJ level about what Mueller's looking into.
And as far as George Papadopoulos is concerned, Pamela, he's the foreign policy advisor who worked for the Trump campaign. He's pled guilty to lying to the FBI. What are you hearing about potentially what he might be able to reveal?
Well, up until now, we've only really heard the White House version of events, calling him a low-level volunteer, a coffee boy. His fiancée sat down with us to paint a different picture. His fiancée, Simona Majante, basically refuted the White House claims and said that he was anything but a low-level volunteer and a coffee boy. She says that he was consistently in touch with high-level campaign officials throughout the campaign, as well as during the transition, that she had many meetings with officials from foreign governments. And so what she really wanted to do was just defend her fiancé in this case and provide his side of the story for the first time. And as we know, he is a cooperating witness in the FBI's Russia probe. He was the first one that we know of to be charged and the first one to plead guilty. So clearly the FBI views him as an important person in this probe.
If he had such an important role, Mark, a central role in this campaign, as his fiancée alleges, where does that leave the Trump team's suggestion that he was merely a coffee boy?
Well, I think we have to go back and look at what his role was and what the campaign, how they were structured at that time. I think it just goes to show, and we knew this at the time, that the folks who were in positions of power were wholly unqualified for the positions of power they were in, whether that's Papadopoulos, who's being, overseas trying to broker deals with Russia, in order to set up a meeting between Donald Trump and Putin, whether you have Sam Clovis, who was his immediate supervisor, who was the chief policy advisor for the campaign, where he is absolutely in no position to be that person. So I do think there's truth in the middle of it. I do think that he was in touch with top campaign advisors. I don't know if they necessarily listened to him all the time, but that doesn't matter. The fact that Clovis green-lighted him to do certain things that we now look at and say, wow, that is terrible, that is a problem.
And also what was new in the interview with her was that she said the campaign approved him doing an interview sitting down with Russian media agency Interfax. She believed it was the only interview he did with Interfax. And so her point was, why would you let a low-level coffee boy represent the campaign with Russian media?
Jackie, why would anyone in the Trump team go out and insult someone who's cooperating with Robert Mueller, the special counsel? Isn't that asking for potential trouble?
This is all about creating distance between whoever that individual is and the campaign for the public consumption. They did it with Manafort. They did it to a lesser extent with Flynn. Flynn's a hard one to do since he actually was in the White House and was a very senior advisor to the president. But this is someone that we didn't even know about until this information came out. So the more distance they can put between themselves and this person, at least in the public eye, the better.
Everyone stand by. There's more information coming into the Situation Room. We'll take a quick break. Resume our coverage right after this. We're back with our panel and Mark Preston. President Trump clearly stepping up his support for Roy Moore to become the next U.S. Senator from Alabama. He tweeted this earlier this morning. Last thing the Make America Great Again agenda needs is a liberal Democrat in the Senate, where we have so little margin for victory already. The Pelosi-Schumer puppet Jones, referring to the opponent, would vote against us 100% of the time. He's bad on crime, life, border, vets, guns, and military. Vote Roy Moore, all in caps. Vote Roy Moore. But the White House still insists the president is concerned about the allegations against Roy Moore. How do you square all that?
Well, the president's having his cake and he's eating it too, right? I mean, what they're doing is that they're giving him enough wiggle room that if something were to come out, some bombshell, they could say, listen, no blood on our hands. We said if something came out that he should have to step down. But the fact of the matter is he is going down to Florida, which is basically Alabama, because it's only about 20 miles away, and he is campaigning on him, as we've seen from that tweet right there, and we've seen from his comments. He is all in, including the Republican National Committee pouring money into that race. So however they try to square it, the fact is he's all in on Roy Moore for bad or good. And for my taste for of it, it's for bad.
Yeah, he's going to be in Pensacola, Jackie, as you know, only about 20 or 25 miles from Alabama. He's going to be giving a campaign rally event there tonight. And presumably he's going to be mentioning how important it is for the folks in Alabama to support Roy Moore.
And Moore's campaign is hoping that Trump helps increase the momentum right before this very critical election day. That said, it didn't work for Luther Strange, so we'll have to see. This is an off-year election. There are some powerful forces working on the other side. I understand that Cory Booker, some other prominent Democrats are going down there to try to get more African-American voters out. So they're really hoping that President Trump can deliver for this campaign in the 11th hour.
Is it really a toss-up right now, Doug Jones, Roy Moore, the Senate race, which is next Tuesday?
I think that's the best way we can describe it. Polling in Alabama is very difficult. We don't often poll in Alabama. And, of course, most people are not going to put a whole lot of credence into the polls. For this race, though, it's who is going to be the most energized. I know we talk about that a lot, but you're talking about Roy Moore supporters who are definitely going to go to the polls. The Democrat supporters, Doug Jones supporters, we're not so sure if they're going to go to the polls. So that's where the rub is for them.
If he's all in for Roy Moore, the president, why not simply go to Alabama and campaign for him between now and Tuesday?
That's an excellent question. Why not? I mean, apparently they've said logistics, they've said other things. Pensacola, I guess, is going to have to be close.
And to that point, Wolf, by the way, when he was in for Luther Strange, he went down there, did a big event, and when Strange lost, he said, hey, it wasn't my fault, but I really did help him. By not going into Alabama, he's given himself some distance to say it's not my fault that Roy Moore lost if he were to lose.
All right, guys, we'll watch the campaign rally later tonight to see what he says. Coming up, evacuations are now underway as new wildfires torch homes and businesses between San Diego and Los Angeles. We're going live to California for an update on this unfold. At this hour, President Trump is heading to a campaign-style rally in Pensacola, Florida. And today's brand new job numbers give him plenty to cheer about. The U.S. economy added 228,000 jobs last month, and the unemployment rate remains at 4.1%, its lowest level since December 2000. Wages are up as well. Let's check in with our White House correspondent, Sarah Murray. Sarah, the president not only has the economy on his mind, but he also has the U.S. Senate race in Alabama on his mind.
That's right, Wolf. And while I expect you will hear the president touting those jobs numbers tonight, it's certainly an issue he feels he hasn't gotten enough credit for. All eyes are going to be on what he says this evening in Alabama, if anything, about his controversial decision to wrap his arms around Alabama Senate hopeful Roy Moore. President Trump putting politics first today, using the bully pulpit to back a GOP Senate candidate accused of molesting a teenage girl. Vote Roy Moore, Trump tweeted today, reiterating his support for the Alabama Senate hopeful just hours before taking off for a campaign-style rally in Pensacola, Florida, just across the border from Alabama. The White House still insists Trump is concerned about the allegations against Moore.
We think that the allegations are troubling.
But if Trump has any qualms, he isn't showing them. Moore has been accused of sexual abuse or assault by 4 women, while 4 other women allege they were pursued by him as teenagers. The candidate has denied doing anything inappropriate, a denial that appears to hold more weight with the president than the mounting evidence against Moore.
He totally denies it. He says it didn't happen. And, you know, you have to listen to him also. Well, I know a lot about guns.
While the Republican National Committee initially said it would stop pouring resources into Moore's campaign, it has since reversed course. As the president places Moore's political value ahead of any concerns about his morality.
We don't want to have a liberal Democrat in Alabama, believe me. We want strong borders. We want stopping crime. We want to have the things that we represent, and we certainly don't want to have a liberal Democrat that's controlled by Nancy Pelosi and controlled by Chuck Schumer. We don't want to have that for Alabama. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
The RNC is following Trump's
But
lead.
It's up to the voters of Alabama right now. This is democracy. They're going to see this play out. They get to make that decision. It's not up to me. And the president has said we want to keep the seat Republican. The RNC is the political arm of the White House, and we want to support the president's agenda.
Yet another controversy awaits the president on his southern swing. After Trump scheduled a stop on Saturday to attend the opening of the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, 2 black congressmen now say they will not attend the event. Democratic Congressman John Lewis, a civil rights icon, and Benny Thompson say they're skipping the event because President Trump's attendance and his hurtful policies are an insult to the people portrayed in this civil rights museum. In a statement, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said the president hopes others will join him in recognizing that the movement was about removing barriers and unifying Americans of all backgrounds.
Now, the president didn't seem particularly eager to discuss Roy Moore or the sexual harassment allegations that have been rocking Congress. He left the White House this evening without stopping by to talk to reporters, but we'll see what happens when he takes the stage in Florida. Wolf?
We certainly will. We'll have coverage of that, of course, later tonight. Sarah, thank you very much. Coming up, a growing concern and more evacuations as California's fire disaster now stretches from north of Los Angeles all the way down to San Diego County. When will the hot, windy weather give firefighters